The big idea today is that God is gracious towards us even when we have bad or ignorant theology, and therefore we should be gracious to one another as well. The example I want to use is the father of our faith, the patriarch Abraham. Um, let's say Abraham, walked up to you on the street today and you asked him, "What do you think about God?" What do you think he would say? And what I mean is this. Um, Abraham lived before we had any before he had any knowledge of what the Trinity was, Father, Son, and Spirit, who Jesus was, the cross, the New Testament, the Old Testament, Moses. He didn't know anything about that, and he came from a culture where they had all sorts of crazy ideas about gods, and those gods were very fickle and nasty and very human like actually, and so this would have been his sort of preconception of what the divine was. And when you think about it, how much through God's revelations to Abraham, how much did God clarify for him who he was? Even by the end of his life, how good of a theology, um, how good would his doctrines of God and this and that have been? Even by the end of his life, I dare to say not very good by our standards. If the Abraham that lived back then walked up to you on the street today and told you his concepts of God and what faith was and this and that, you might call him a heretic. Once again, by our standards, at least, and what we know of God now. Um, but whereas we might call him a heretic, God, at that time called him his own beloved, a covenant partner. And that is because God is much more patient, much more gracious, flexible. His love is wide and deep and long, more than we can imagine. And I think he has lots of room for letting people have um, imperfect theologies and doctrines. And, Abraham is one example of many you could use from the Bible and even from church history as a whole. Um, so I think we should have the same graciousness, patience, and flexibility as God has towards us.